Hello. I did my project at Behavioral Health Services in Racine. My project was to create a supportive environment for the advanced practice nurse. So, in my research, what I had found was that mental health practices have changed from a treatment orientated model to a recovery focused model. The aim of this change was to decrease stigma of behavioral health and substance addiction and to really emphasize a resilience that the patient has and using the patient to um, support their own control over their own problems in life. I also found that what helped to shape this recovery oriented focus was the economic downturn that had happened and then legislative and economic changes. The Affordable Care Act, Mental Health Parity, Addiction and Equality Act, all of these have helped to change that. According to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, in 2015, they state that the economic recession caused 4.3 billion in state cuts from overall mental health care systems. This means that we really, really do need to use all of our available resources very, very responsibly and very, very efficiently. Um, SAMHSA in 2011 published also a set of 8 strategic initiatives called Leading Change. This was in response to the economic downturn and also the Affordable Care Act and Mental Health Parity Act that happened. And basically, it was 8 strategic initiatives to increase high quality, cost effective care during the times of fiscal restraint. Um, so in 2018, the National Council of Medical Director Institute, they all met and basically they talked about the detrimental effects of these psychiatric shortages that are happening and poor access to psychiatric services caused from all of these governmental reforms, the opioid crisis, all of that. So what they found is, or what they state is that we should use an expanding way of delivering psychiatric care. One that is really taking off is called the collaborative care model, and that's using psychiatric services in primary care institutes, increasing the efficiency of how we deliver psychiatric services through the use of telehealth, apps, those types of things. And then expanding the workforce using other providers, such as nurse practitioners, physician assistants, and then also pharmacology, which I thought was kind of cool. Now, advanced practice nursing in mental health is not new. It's been around since 1965. And actually, the use of advanced practice nurses in mental health was one of the first places that they were used. So, as I continued to research, I had found a lot of problems in using advanced practice nurses basically in all aspects. So, what I found was that organizations are really lacking a structure to define what the advanced practice nurse practitioner's role is, and then standardizing their practice within the organization, understanding what privileges they hold. There's a decreased knowledge on their educational credentials, and also overall a decrease in the lack of support from leadership. Organizational management, other providers, other practitioners, policymakers, researchers, they also have a decreased knowledge of the full scope of practice for an advanced practice nurse practitioner. In 2011, the American Academy of Nurse Practitioners actually wrote comments to the 2010 IOM report of the future of nursing, leading change, advancing health. They made a couple of recommendations, and the first recommendation that they said was to remove the scope of practice barriers and allow the advanced practice nurse practitioner to work within their full scope of practice. And as we go back to this slide, you can see that only 21 states have full practicing rights for their nurse practitioners. So what then I did is I took and did a very informal interview with the administrator of the Department of Health and Human Services for Racine County, the director at Behavioral Health Services, and also the advanced practice nurse practitioner that works there. And what I found was that these same gaps are happening within this organization. And so that's where I said, hey, you know what? I can do something about this. I can help. And this is really where I came in. So we created a team, and the team was created from the administrator of the Department of Health and Human Services, the director of Behavioral Health Services, the advanced practice nurse practitioner, and then also the lead psychologist who became my project mentor and kind of my change champion at Behavioral Health Services. We came up with a shared vision and some objectives, and those objectives were to provide a supportive environment that allowed the advanced practice nurse practitioner to work within her full scope of practice, and to increase the knowledge of scope of practice for everyone, and to also increase, therefore making a supportive environment for the advanced practice nurse practitioner. So basically what I set out to do is I sat down, I said, okay, here's our objectives, here's what I'm going to do, and sat down to do research because as a DNP, what we do is we transcribe the research that's out there and bring it into practice. So no problem, this is what I'm going to do. Problem was I did not find a whole lot of research on how to do this. In fact, I found no research. However, what I did find over and over again was scope of practice, scope of practice, scope of practice. So I set out to really find out what in the world is this scope of practice. And so what I really found was that the scope of practice is not a definitive set of boundaries. Rather, it's this kind of intangible concept. It depends on the advanced practice nurse practitioner's practice level, their educational preparation, their current activities, their clinical practice, the environment, the culture within the environment, trends, issues that are happening right now, their roles, their responsibilities, their standards of practice for their subspecialty, any continuing education they may have done, any research that is currently out, state and governmental policies, and all of this is kind of changing and is different for wherever the advanced practitioner works. At the end, I'm going to show or share with you some of the things that I also found that kind of feed into this. So basically, I had this eureka moment, and I was able to create a concept map of all of the scope of practices for the advanced practice nurse practitioner within behavioral health services. And then from those domains, created the items through research. So this really is an evidence-based concept map. So all of the items that go under those domains that I had found through research. Once I had found those, everything else really came into focus and fell into place really quite quickly. I needed to use some kind of framework that would help keep me on track and help me to not miss anything as I was going through this. So I use the National Institute of Health's Plan, Do, Study, Act model. And you start in the first area with plan. And basically, that asks you a bunch of questions like who, what, where, when. So, what organizational policies do I need to create? What resources need to be created? Who's responsible for all of this? Where will these policies be resourced? When will all of this be accomplished? Who will be using all of these things? It helps you to ask all of those questions to the team to come up with a great definitive all-encompassing document. Then you move on to the do stage, which allows you to systematically gather all of your data that from those questions, and then compress them and further analyze them. Is there anything else that we need to look at? Are there state legislations? Are there laws? Are there things within the county that we need to look at? The third stage, study, really is a formative process that lets you go back and evaluate what you did. And so what we did is we evaluated each domain after we did it. So we did this one domain at a time and then evaluated each domain at each time. And then the final act, the final stage, which is act, allows you to kind of finalize that documentation and then bring it for approval to the administrator and the advanced practice nurse practitioner. And then this is just what one of the final documents look like. So then at the end, we did a performance evaluation. And the performance evaluation that we did used elements from the CDC's evaluation process. This was a 2011 evaluation process of program evaluation for public health programs. This looked at the program itself and then the deliverables for accuracy, feasibility, proprietary usage, and then utility. So we looked at all of the documents that we did and the program and how we did it in one fell swoop. And then we also went back to the advanced practice nurse practitioner, went back to our original objectives and said, okay, did we meet our objectives? We by no means wanted to decrease any perception of autonomy in the advanced practice nurse. We wanted to create a more supportive environment. So did we do that? We also asked her, does she feel more supportive? Does she feel also that the leadership now has a better understanding of the scope of practice? And does she feel that the resources that we gave her are more adequate? And so we evaluated and made any changes after that. So what did I learn from all of this? I learned that not only is the scope of practice dependent on all of those things that we talked about before and all those domains, but it is also very individualized. It takes into account the values of each individual advanced practice nurse practitioner. So when you are creating organizational policies and resources based on that, you really have to make them generalized enough that that each practitioner can still use their own values. That it's not going to impede on that. I also learned a lot about myself and my own abilities, and I have to say, I'm pretty proud of myself. So thanks for listening.